So I'm going to introduce our next presenter. Anyone who's accessed Legito's blogs has seen, we would like to write up things on current trends in the industry, and those are authored by our thought leader, Charles Drayson. So today, Charles is going to discuss his experiences with automation and how to become a citizen developer and why you should too. Please welcome to the stage, Charles Drayson.
Thanks, John. Okay, most of you don't know me, and it seems every presentation at the moment has to say something about artificial intelligence. So I thought I'd kick off by asking ChatGPT to tell you about my background. So I asked, who is Charles Drayson? There is a notable individual named Charles Drayson who is known for his achievements in the field of business and motorsports. Charles Drayson, also known as Lord Drayson, is a British entrepreneur, businessman, and former government minister. And it says, I have several speed records for my participation in FIA Formula E championship races. I was a government minister between 2005 and 2010, and I advocated for the advancement of science, technology, and innovation in the UK. Unfortunately, this slide is a more accurate description of my experience in motorsports. My one and only participation in motorsports ended before I even completed one lap of a go-karting event. I was the only one who'd never raced before. There was no practice lap. One of the marshals simply briefed me beside the track. I could drive, it's not that complicated. On the long straight section, he said, down there, you can put your foot to the floor, he said. On that long straight section, I did put my foot to the floor. And alas, all long straight sections of racetracks come to an end eventually, typically with a bend. I failed to slow down, I didn't get through the bend, I left the track through the pit lane and hit a brick wall. What happened after that was only reported to me because I was unconscious. I hit the wall, fuel and oil started to pour out of the cart. Marshals came onto the track to lift me out. One of them slipped in the oil, slid under the cart and snapped his leg. And two of us were in hospital. That's not the only incorrect detail from ChatGPT. Here I am standing outside 10 Downing Street a few years ago, admittedly, the home of our British Prime Minister, but I was not there as a government minister. I was there because the government invited representatives from software companies who'd been selected as having technology which the government thought had the biggest potential to achieve cost savings and efficiencies in public sector organizations. And one of those technologies was document automation. And I was there with Gary Yunson, who is here today. Incidentally, this is the real Lord Drayson, now Baron Drayson. He's actually my cousin. He's not Charles. But perhaps Andra will invite him to speak to you next year, because he does champion IT. This is what ChatGPT should have said. I was lucky to be in that generation of kids who were the first to be introduced to computers at school. In the early 1980s, I had a maths teacher who told us about computers and programming. But this was a time when code was translated onto punch cards and fed into a mainframe computer at a nearby university that filled a room. It was before PCs existed and before the internet existed. If we did a maths calculation and the answer added up to more than 256, which is the biggest number that can be represented in 8 bits of binary code, we had to manually code, otherwise we got a stack overflow error, an overflow error. It was strictly for nerds, but I was hooked. This was a time of mass unemployment in the UK, and I remember a school careers advisor telling me, would you believe, messing around with computers is fine as a hobby, but it's not a career. And I became a lawyer. I qualified as a lawyer in London with what is now Hogan Lovells. I spent a few years with Evershed Sutherland, which is one of the 10 largest law firms in the world. And that's when I first came across document automation technology. I also served as general counsel and EMEA for Ceridian Corporation, which was then a US quoted corporation, and a provider of business-critical outsourced services in payroll and HR. And it was my time with Ceridian that marked the point when I became what I would now call a citizen developer. We won the Legal IT Award for mitigating risk through the use of IT. We automated 20,000 contracts in that time, and it now marks 20 years since I've been working with document automation. It's fair to say I arrived at Ceridian in interesting times. I had some challenges to address. I was responsible for about 1,000 documents a year, 1,000 contract documents a year, and a team of 70+ salespeople. The products were complex, and the task of creating contracts was error-prone, and one of the issues the SEC investigation found was that we needed to do more work to make sure our contracts and contract management more accurately reflected customer projects and actual customer revenues. It was time to turn to automation. I had no budget. I had no chance of getting help from our IT team because they were busy developing customer applications. At the same time, the common expectation of IT solutions could be summarized in this slide. I needed contracts to be better. The sales team needed contracts to be faster. But my lack of budget prevented me throwing money at the task. And so there was only one option. It was time to roll my sleeves up and experiment with document automation that I'd seen a few years earlier. And I signed up for a free trial and started building. That gave me 4 weeks to see if it was a system that I could use. The software itself had a modest cost, but I didn't have the budget to pay consultants to do everything for me. I didn't know it then, but I couldn't have used consultants anyway because we didn't have a clear specification for the documents we needed. I would need to build the templates myself. Our contracts were just too complicated to explain to consultants. And I knew I could do it. I knew I couldn't do that, but I needed to know that I could build the solution. So Gartner have this definition of a citizen developer. And the question was, could I become one? By the time we finished, we had a fairly chunky set of templates. They spanned over 1,000 pages of text, over 40 templates. We modeled 1,400 variable parameters, modeling our pricing and our products. And at that time, the automation tool I used had to be controlled using script. This is what script looked like then. These scripts look a lot like programming code. They also had another feature in common with programming code. It was easy to add errors when building templates. But finding the mistake in all that code was hard. It was perhaps unsurprising that most automation projects deployed by organizations were built by professional developers, usually external consultants. The cost of automation software was modest, but the cost of hiring developers was not. In addition to the significant cost, the problem with delegating all the work to consultants is that someone has to take the time to brief them on the requirements, brief them on your documents, and you need to spend the time getting the documents in good shape for them to use. Imagine how hard that is to do with the details of the products we had, which were complex. So complex that even our own staff struggled to understand our pricing and products. And doing that while we had a day job. When you see software vendors do demonstrations, they typically demonstrate something simple. But you know your organization isn't simple. Very few organizations are simple. Complexity arrives over time because real life is complex. So in real life, we have to balance the two propositions on this slide. We'd all like solutions to be simple, but the risk is they become simplistic. The task of a citizen developer is to cater for complexity when it can't be avoided, but the trick is to build a solution that's elegant and even to handle that complexity. But don't dumb down the solution because users will quickly rubbish it. Give them a solution that's robust enough to get the work done, but present it in a way that's intuitive and helpful. Let's look again at the Gartner definition of a citizen developer, but this time with the second half of the definition. All citizen developers are business technologists. There is no required designation of proficiency or time allocation for citizen developers, but they must be employees of the organization. Let's bring that to life. It means citizen developers are people who work in your organization. They're not members of your IT team, and their job title is not citizen developer. They have roles which means they understand how your team works and what it does. Their domain expertise is your business operations. They know how work gets done, not just normal operations, but what happens when things aren't normal. They know what good looks like. They know how they're accountable to other departments in the organization. They know the inputs they receive from other teams and know the outputs they have to pass to other teams. So what does it take to become a citizen developer? Could this be you? Could you find people in your organization who fit these requirements? A vision to see how things could be improved. Confidence to try something new and experiment. And a desire to contribute and make an impact. And an infectious passion to get the support of management. But look at what's not on the list. You don't need to be a programmer. You don't need to be used to writing specifications, detailed requirements for consultants, provided you do pick a no-code or low-code platform. And this is the biggest change I've seen in my 20 years working with automation tools. And we should take a minute to consider the impact of that no-code, low-code. So you've already seen older automation platforms are built using script-based controls. You have to learn the syntax for scripts. Just like learning the vocabulary and grammar for a new language. Eventually you do become fluent, but it takes time. No code means fewer errors, less time fixing bugs. The less obvious problem with code-based tools is more prevalent when you have a big feature set. When I was writing the scripts you saw earlier, the software only did one thing. It created Word documents from a template. There was no workflow, no document management, no collaboration tools, no digital signatures, no customized views, no reports. There were no reports. I only had to learn the code to control the document automation. Modern automation platforms like Legito have a much broader feature set, and new features are being added all the time. And if those features were driven by code-based scripts, you would need to grasp a bigger syntax set every time a new feature comes out. With code-based systems, the tool and the code demand your brain power, leaving less focus for the task. But here's the most important difference. Code-based tools are intimidating for new users. They make it less likely that your business experts will volunteer to step up to become citizen developers. And you do want subject matter experts, not just people who like to geek out on code, albeit I once did. Citizen developers are now more widely recognized as force multipliers in an organization. They're good for the organization and they're good for the people who work for you. The type of people who make good citizen developers are inherently valuable team members. And those are people you absolutely need to retain and motivate. If they meet these requirements, giving them an opportunity to be citizen developers will help you do that. They already understand your business. They know how to make it better. You trust them. They're the people you want in control of your new solutions and systems. They want what's best, and their interests are aligned to yours. Give those people the tools to do the job, and you won't have to translate your requirements for consultants who are alien to your organization and alien to your culture. And even if your organization is big enough to have a well-resourced IT team with in-house developers, those people are in short supply right now. So using citizen developers can bridge the skills gap, free up your developers to work on systems that demand hard coding and solid IT skills. And citizen developers get projects live more quickly, and they will innovate and iterate solutions more regularly. They'll navigate your compliance and internal procedures more intuitively. They already know them. If you want your organization to thrive using citizen developers, you do need to provide the best environment for them. As soon as you realize you might want more than a few of them, the best thing you can do is create what's generally become known as a center of excellence. Think of it as an informal grouping of citizen developers, and it provides multiple benefits with either little or no cost. It provides all the benefits on this slide, but overall, they provide the best way to spread the solutions in your organization after the first few projects reveal that you do have potential for growth. They will seed your future projects, and they'll help you sustain and maintain solutions after they're deployed. A center of excellence is a pool of experience and skills which works best if you do use solutions that will span the whole enterprise, like Legito. I live in Stratford-upon-Avon, so I couldn't resist borrowing some Shakespeare to bring me to the heart of the matter. Why would you choose to become a citizen developer? If any of you in this room or your colleagues back at base could step up to become citizen developers, there's good news for you. A seasoned veteran of legal technology, who some of you in this room do know, used to tell me all the time that he spent most of his career dealing with lawyers who were looking for ways to become non-lawyers. It's true to say that my diversion into automating contracts did reawaken a teenage interest in working with IT, but it has brought much more than a distraction from being a lawyer. And if I achieve nothing else today, I do want to share the sense of fulfillment and satisfaction and stimulus that I've got from working with these platforms. If you're a citizen developer, you don't have to work with awkward systems being done to you or imposed on you by people who don't understand the needs of your team. You can build something that suits you. And it's immensely satisfying to use your skills and experience to do something that multiplies your impact and helps your colleagues. Harnessing the power of solutions like Legito to help your team work better is a contribution that will get you noticed. You don't need to be a manager. You don't need to have any particular seniority. You probably don't need permission to get started. You'll be delivering something of value using initiative. You'll become one of those people that gets recognized as a linchpin, someone who delivers. And every organization has those people. I bet you can all think of individuals in your organization that nobody would want to lose. They're probably not senior executives. They get the best bonuses and nobody ever asks why, and they're known outside the departments where they work. They're recognized by colleagues as well as management, and they're the people you want on the A team when something important's going down. New joiners in the organization want to work with them. Citizen developers fall into that category of people. But is there bad news on the horizon? Let's come back to a topic I mentioned earlier, artificial intelligence. And I'm sure you've all seen headlines like these. And ChatGPT is one of the most talked about AI solutions, widely touted to bring about a revolution that will not be good news for workers. Maybe citizen developers will be out of a job soon. I started this talk with an example offered for amusement, but I don't want you to lose sight of the important point. I hear senior executives talk about AI and acknowledge that it's not perfect, but they do get excited about shiny new things. Effectively, they're saying it's not perfect, but it's pretty damn good, and is good enough to do wondrous things. I wouldn't be on stage if I was cynical about all advances in IT. But I do believe that many executive teams, fed by a diet of headlines and too time poor to do deep reading and research, misunderstand the nature and inherent flaws in some IT algorithms, some AI algorithms. You've probably already heard about the risk of AI perpetuating biases to create machine-based discrimination. So let's talk about a different flaw. Let me use a human metaphor to explain the point I'm making. We all know that surgeons can make mistakes like the rest of us. A surgeon doesn't perform with 100% success. We accept the risk because we have to, albeit we do like professionals to do what they can to minimize the risk. And many executives think AI is like that. It's not 100%, but nothing is. But the deficiencies in AI are not like that. When AI goes wrong, the results can be so crazy that the scale of the error is simply not comparable to the errors made by most professionals. When humans make mistakes, they tend to make mistakes within predictable boundaries that permit risk mitigation strategies. For example, pilots and surgeons use checklists to avoid making mistakes which come about from human fallibility. But many of the errors made by AI systems, if they're not filtered, can go wrong in unpredictable ways. And that was the point of my example at the beginning of this talk. Anybody in this room who wanted to check out my background using basic web resources would not have had difficulty realizing you were not about to hear from a government minister with former speed records in electric cars. There's no shortage of online resources about my background, and yet ChatGPT got it wrong. And this is the important bit. It does not get it wrong in ways that we would expect. The mistake about my background is not because I have the same name, for example. I'm Charles Drayson. The chap you saw earlier is Paul Drayson. In case you think that my example is a one-off example of dysfunction, let me use a more serious example. And this one's actually so recent that it came out after my slides had already gone to the production team. So this, beg your pardon. So this is a judgment, not a judgment, a motion filed in the US Supreme Court only a couple of weeks, pardon me, only a couple of weeks ago. And it's noticed to show cause for a lawyer who went to court and presented a skeleton argument and submissions for a case, and it turned out that 6 of his cases were totally fictitious, and his submissions and some of the quotations were bogus. It was created by AI. And in fact, only on Monday of this week, my wife, who's a judge in the UK, brought home an internal memo for which has been distributed in her court, now warning judges specifically to be on the lookout for submissions and skeleton arguments coming to them that have been created by AI because they look very real. Beg your pardon, I got my slides wrong. So it follows from this that I don't think that AI is going to be the end of all our woes, end of all our jobs. But my experience of using automation is that when automation is deployed to do tasks that humans currently do, you start with tasks that are mundane and tedious for humans to do. And as they get better and better and they go further into the process, there comes a point where they need to be configured, steered, and guided by humans. The humans who know when the automation should stop and when the humans should start. And I think citizen developers are going to be at that junction. Oops, sorry, I went backwards. Citizen developers, I believe, will transpire to have been the craftsmen and women of the 21st century. And we all know instinctively in our hearts the ability of craftsmen and women to make things better. So if you have people in your organizations or you yourselves feel you could do this, it is time to step forward and step up to do that. With solutions like Legito, we don't pretend that automation is going to cover all of the things that humans do. We very rarely recommend an automation that totally displaces human endeavor. We believe that the tools work best when they augment the work done by humans. And citizen developers will understand instinctively how best to do that. So this is one session where we said we would have time for questions at the end. So I know where John who's polling the questions. Hi, John.
All right, thanks, Charles. That was fantastic. You know, through our many years in document automation, we'll find clients that love the product, and their struggle is finding someone that can actually implement. And so they always ask, we always say subject matter expert, someone who's technical, and now we have a name for it, citizen developer. So yep. I'll be using that. So we have a couple questions. So how realistic is it to use citizen developers for the whole implementation? Do you sometimes need external consultants?
So before I answer that, let me give some context. Although I am a citizen developer, I've also done my stint as a consultant as well. So I'm not biased against consultants, and plainly Legito has some fine ones. So let me tell you where I think the consultants have their place and why I think citizen developers have theirs. So consultants are absolutely the people you need if you're an organization that's bought a solution and you want it up and running quickly. You don't want to give the folk in your organization the time to learn the tool, inevitably make some mistakes and have to do some rework. If you've got to get up and running quickly, consultants are a good way to do that. Ideally, they would do it in conjunction with the people who want to train up to become citizen developers. The other place for consultants is if you do have some hard integration skills or some one-off tasks like configuring single sign-on, things like that. That's absolutely the thing for consultants. But I think having citizen developers is actually going to be essential if you want these solutions to be around in the long term. You don't want to have to turn to external consultants every time you make a change in future. You want your own teams to be able to do that.
Absolutely. You want the in-house expertise. Another question did come along those lines, and I think this is a good one. How would you recommend citizen developers collaborate and work alongside professional developers within a team?
Well, I think first thing is collaborating shouldn't be confined to within your organization. One of the things I've found on these platforms is that there's a good deal of collaboration between organizations, and we hope that events like this will be the start of that. And I would totally encourage any formal or informal groupings of people so you can share experiences, because everyone starts at one end of the curve and gradually gets up. And I found that people like sharing that knowledge, and indeed that's why I'm here. So find groupings to do it. I think, if I'm honest, in future it's something we might do more to facilitate at Legito. That kind of, we need to get enough critical mass of people who want to do it to make it interesting, but that collaboration is really important. But with the consultants, most of our consultants have got plenty of work to do. It is in their interest to help organizations get self-sufficient, so ideally working alongside them and doing a bit of knowledge transfer while they're doing it is obviously beneficial. But it would take a bit longer to do that. You do have to meet the halfway. They can't spoon feed it to you. You do have to make some efforts yourself as well.
Absolutely. Well, that's it for the questions. Thank you very much, Charles.
Thanks,
Very good. Thank you.